Thanks very much, Adam, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today from all over the world. So it's my real distinct pleasure to welcome our two guests this morning. First off is Saeed Amidi, who's our CEO and founder of Plug and Play, the world's largest open innovation ecosystem, and also one of the most active venture capital firms in North America. Saeed's a serial entrepreneur with nearly 30 years experience founding, operating and growing successful companies all around the world. He's also one of the most successful investors in Silicon Valley with a portfolio of well over 1,000 startups and notable exits, which Adam mentioned, Dropbox, Danger, PayPal, etc. He's a global thought leader. He calls himself Mr. Sustainability with a real passion for sustainable innovation, but really has a single passion for inspiring and helping entrepreneurs and corporations alike succeed through open innovation. So great to have you here. Good morning, Saeed.
Great being here, Simon, and really enjoy to have a fireside chat with Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, welcome this morning. We've got Michelle Sourie Robinson, who's the president and CEO of the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, MMSDC. It's a not-for-profit organization dedicated to creating and developing successful business relationships between minority business enterprises, MBEs, and multinational companies. It was founded in 1977 and certifies minority businesses. It assists in their development and connects them to an organization's network of corporate members who are eager to do business with them. Annually, MMSDC helps facilitate $36 billion in spend between corporations and is a certified minority-owned business and certified minority-owned businesses. Michelle has a proven track record of leading companies through successful growth and change processes, and during her 5-year tenure, she's crafted an organizational strategic plan, developed new processes and systems, infused professional talent, and raised more than 1.7 million in new funding to drive cutting-edge programs ranging from workforce development to one-on-one MBE professional consultations. She's a proud Oklahoma native. She earned her BS in Organizational Administration from Oklahoma State University, and like yours truly, she holds a JD from University of Kansas, which I hear is the land of milk and honey. So Michelle, absolute pleasure to have you here this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Simon. I'm so excited to be here to talk with you. You and Saeed, the team.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, I'm going to leave you guys to it. So over to you, Saeed. And for our audience, we're going to be doing some Q&A with both Michelle and Saeed at the end of the fireside chat. So in the center of your screen down the bottom, if you hover over, you might notice a little Q&A box. So please do make use of that. I'll be monitoring it. If you have any connectivity issues or otherwise, use the chat box and our tech team will be looking at it. But for the Q&A, use the Q&A box and I'll see you both at the end. So over to you.
Wonderful, Michelle. It's great seeing you on Zoom. I hope sometime soon we can see each other close by. You know, if I can ask you, Michelle, you know, like you were looking for innovation platform to collaborate with your organization to, you know, sort of follow your mission in getting new suppliers, but also new technology startups on the platform. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey and your thought process before we met, I would say almost 2 years ago?
Right. Absolutely. So I will tell you, for us, it was literally just listening to the voice of the customer, Saeed. As you now know, our board includes the chief procurement officers from some of the largest brands in the world. And one of the things that they had shared with us, and I think Adam alluded to it earlier, is that Detroit was not seeing the type of startup activity that we needed to see in order to bring the greatest innovative minds here, really in looking at mobility. At the time, Hau Tai-Tang, a Ford Motor Company, their global procurement officer, was the chair of my board. And when he simply shared with me the amount of spending that they had to do for basic testing and identifying sources, a lot of that was outside of the state of Michigan. So we put our caps on to say, how do we solve this dilemma for our customers? At the same time, about that same time, I should say, I attended CES that year, and was just at the CES and just looking at the Consumer Electronics Show and thinking to myself, where are the minority and women-owned firms that I know have the ability? So we kind of went on this entire mission of really laying out and scoping, and some of our friends, Christy Wong Barrett, Sid Johnson, were really critical in that process of really scoping out what it took to create an innovation platform, because we didn't just want a traditional incubator. So then, in a very gutsy move for a 501c3, we had met with both city, state officials, as well as many other partners here, but we embarked on a mission to go to Silicon Valley and identify the right partner. And I'm not just saying it because you're on the call, but when we met with you and your team, Saeed, we knew that it was the right fit. It literally felt like Cinderella with the shoe. You know, it just fit. Your model fit exactly what our customers needed. And when we looked at that and being able to combine a true platform, giving us the ability to look at the type of expertise that you had, but also using the council's unique ability to bring together very, very fierce competitors. As you know, it's very difficult to get all of these organizations, these OEMs, to move in the same direction, but we were certain that with your platform, it was going to work. So certainly pre-COVID, we had grandiose ideas that we would have already been out and a part of the auto show last month. That has certainly delayed us a bit, but it certainly hasn't taken us off the mark to launch, and we are excited about doing that with you and your team.
Wonderful. First, Michelle, thank you so much for the event you organized with us. I think it was at the Fiat Chrysler headquarters and their training center, where we presented to Ford, GM, and a great number of tier one suppliers. You know, we feel that when we build this platform, innovation platform, everybody benefits. The big corporations and specifically the entrepreneurs. It's really hard to navigate these big corporations in any part of the world. But with your help and having access, as you said, to the procurement officer, to the R&D teams, we try to bring in technology and time to the market shorter. Right. And we want to put a special emphasis on finding great minority entrepreneurs, investing in their technology and company, and help them in their journey. And again, as you said, we have got a little bit delayed.
Right.
But how do you see your organization could help us to find great entrepreneurs and to, for example, connect them to Silicon Valley and the way we build companies in Silicon Valley?
Right, right. I think, quite honestly, I think that's certainly in our wheelhouse. What we do is identify the smartest women and minority firms around the country. And some of the innovation that comes out of these firms is really second to none. The difference has been they typically simply don't have access, and that's where our organization comes into play. We are one of 23 affiliates with MMSDC, so we partner with thousands of minority businesses and our affiliate counterparts. But in addition to that, we operate a minority business development agency out of the Department of Commerce. So we also have that government lens in being able to attract the best and the brightest. We've established our own goal with you, as you know, to identify classes of 40% women and minority firms. And I've often had people say, well, isn't that nothing more than a set aside? And it is absolutely not a set aside. We just know that what we measure, we actually achieve because we perform to those measurements. And we want to hold ourselves accountable to ensuring that if there are great women-owned entrepreneurs out there that simply need an opportunity to get the right type of coaching and grooming that this innovation platform will provide, we're doing that. But we're also working with all of the affiliates around the country and the chambers of commerce to identify those amazing entrepreneurs that are really out there as diamonds in the rough, and we will give them the opportunity to actually commercialize their idea.
Wonderful. If I can share with you and the audience a little bit of our experience, you know, when we launched this platform in Stuttgart, we brought some entrepreneurs from all around the world to Stuttgart, and many of them, after they succeeded with Mercedes or Porsche or BASF, they set their company there to serve these big conglomerates. And we feel there is an incredible startup ecosystem in and around Detroit, but we would love to blend it with startups from California, startups from all over US. So this way, everybody can rise together. I mean, I must little bit switch our talk because this COVID-19 had little bit of a bump in the road. And I love to ask, you know, how have you overcome this challenge of, you know, this coronavirus? And then I would love to talk to you about the social activity of Black Lives Matter. And, you know, and I would say that is a great opportunity. But let's talk about Corona first.
Okay. You know, I really believe that within every crisis, there are opportunities. And in particular for innovation, for cost optimization right now, for really innovative solutions that help our corporations reduce their cost or bring them cutting edge innovation. Now is the time for that. And that's why I certainly say our work has been delayed, but it has certainly not been finished. And that is because now more than ever, we realize the need for this. When I look at COVID-19, for example, one of the things that we always tout with minority firms is that minority firms have the ability to be quick, to be nimble, and they will be the organizations that OEMs and tier ones can count on in crisis mode. And I have to tell you, COVID-19 proved just that. When we had hospital systems, governments throughout the country that were looking for PPE, literally some of the largest brands in the world could not provide that PPE, but we found minority-owned firms were uniquely positioned to pull together their resources and meet those needs. But in addition, they also had foreign contacts that were able to get product to the US much faster because they had personal connection, sometimes even familial connection. So we put together, for example, Saeed, just learning from you as to how to pivot, because I have to say, you mentioned Stuttgart, and that was one of the things we were most impressed with you, that you were able to pull together resources from throughout an entire region to come together, and we felt that we could duplicate that in Detroit, but look at all 50 states and then the globe beyond that. And when we looked at COVID-19, we pivoted very quickly and said, one of the opportunities, knowing that diverse businesses, sometimes smaller businesses, can be much more flexible and much more quick to operate in a crisis mode, we pulled our resources together and created a sourcing platform that was not only used by all the 23 affiliates of our minority supplier development councils in the country, but it was also used by the MBDA. That was all powered out of Michigan. We charged no one for it. But what we did, we were able to work with chief procurement officers of state governments throughout the country to help them get that much needed life-saving PPE, and to be able to pull the resources together in that fashion, we were able to show show the dynamic and also show the power of businesses coming together and collaborating to help in really a moment of crisis. I think we were all mortified to see things like hospital frontline workers not able to find masks and gowns and things like that that they needed. But I think the same applies when we think about innovation. We have the ability, and uniquely so in this innovation platform, to pull together startups that might not have otherwise had an opportunity to get in front of a major brand like FCA. We have the ability to pull them together, and then with the resources that you and your team provide and the coaching that you provide, we literally have the ability to not only have FCA meet its need in identifying amazing suppliers that provide an innovative solution, but we also help a startup that otherwise might not have known where to begin to getting a product that can literally make an impact in the marketplace.
Wonderful. I know that one of our automotive supplier, filter supplier, Man & Hummel, was able to convert their factories in US to produce the necessity of the mask or the gown. They kind of said, you know, I think within less than 2 weeks, Ford gave them a purchase order. And he said, normally the purchase order from Ford would take 6 months. But it is, as you said, during challenging times, people work better together and they work faster for a common cause. And I would say the common cause is hopefully we can get to healthier workplace soon. But during this this tough time, also we had this social awakening, I would say. Right. Can you tell me, we as Plug and Play work with a lot of, women founders, minorities, but even for us, it was like, suddenly it came to the front line that we have to be much more proactive. Right. We committed to 3 nonprofit charities that help, Black women education. I have never had my teammates be united on a cause like this.
Yeah.
And it is really like so incredible. I mean, like I was interested, but my teammates are passionate about it. Can you tell me from your lens, how we can take advantage of this?
Right. I have to say, I think you touched on something big, and I have to say that every millennial on this call, they often get a bad rap, but I have been so inspired by the manner in which they've come together to ensure that no one's left behind and everyone is fully included. When I look at the history of supplier diversity and the work that we do, most people overlook the fact that it literally began in 1960s. The first real efforts were in 1969. And it all came about, believe it or not, as a result of race riots. These were the race riots that had broken out after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in April of 1968. Part of the reason those riots broke out was the social injustice, the belief that no matter how hard I work as a Black person, I'll never be able to simply be on par, economic parity, send my kids to a great school, have a home in a neighborhood where I'd like to live, work, and play. I won't be able to do that because of injustice. In the 60s, President Nixon responded to that with a task force that he assembled to say, how do we solve that ill? Supplier diversity was birthed so that we could have economic development within communities led by the entrepreneurs that would own businesses and employ people from those communities as not only their employee base, but also so that you could have ownership within these companies. 50 years later, let's fast forward, and I have to say what we have achieved is this. We went from roughly 90,000 minority businesses in 1969 that had more than one paid employee to more than 1 million today, Saeed, that have more than one paid employee. Where we have not closed the gap and where you hear the riots being the voice of the unheard right now are because if you look at those 1 million businesses, what percentage would you guess are over of those 1 million businesses? What percentages have more than $1 million in annual revenue?
I would say 10%.
It's less than 2%.
Wow.
Which also poses the issue. So A, they're not able to employ the number of people that they should be able to employ from minority communities, but they're also not able to sell directly to major corporations at that size. So it's hard to truly amass wealth. The call to order for me right now, and this is why I'm so impressed with this millennial generation that have come together, all races, creeds, colors, coming together saying enough is enough. It's going to stop at our generation, and we're going to make you listen until we have policies that are fair, until we have access that is fair. Where you and I come into play here, and I went to my younger brother and said, I want to go march. And he said, that's not your role. What we need you to do is figure out how to help us after we march. So Saeed, I would tell you, I'm not talking about our ages, but let's help them after they march really come up with progressive solutions. And those solutions are very clear. Let's insist on the growth so that we move that number so that we're well beyond 2%. Do you realize what the 2% to 8% or 2% to 10%, that 8% gap, if we were to able to ensure those businesses could grow at a passion, at a clip and at a rate, and really embody the passion of those communities, you employ people, you create jobs. And when you do that and there's a sense of dignity within communities, then you have people that know that it's their community, they own it. And that's how we're going to change this, to make sure our children's children never have to return to this place. We have the power to do that.
No, I really, really believe in and echo what you have said. You know, in a small way, plug and play, we organize the task force, and after making contribution to Black Girls Code, the Hidden Genius Project, Equal Justice Initiative, we feel this is just the beginning. You know, I remember listening to the NPR news yesterday, and they said, like, if you read one book about justice or social justice, you don't think you did enough. It is just really for us to focus on making a positive impact and identifying those talented entrepreneurs and helping them in their journey, like we have done with so many startups in the world. And again, the first time I met you and, you know, we talked, I feel the two organizations could do a great impact. We just have to find the best talent and enable them to build great companies.
Absolutely.
And again, I really, there is always little bumps in the road, but I am a true optimist, and I hope and I will put the best effort forward myself and my team to do this together with you. If I may little bit ask, how is the economy of Detroit now? I mean, I'm very familiar with the auto industry. Again, I hate to keep talking about Mercedes, but Mercedes shut down for the first time in 100 years. I think it was for either 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But now they are coming back almost at 70, 80%. How is it? Because you're closer to Ford, to Fiat, Chrysler, GM. How would you measure the status of today?
You know, I have to say, when I look at our corporate partners right now, I see a tentative mode. I think that's the best way to approach it. They are all basically back up and running. But they're also paying attention and looking at the possible pandemic, the possible resurgence of that pandemic. They're looking at consumer confidence. Whenever you have, 50 million unemployed people in the country, that certainly is going to impact, actually first, I believe, the automotive industry. They feel it while the rest of us are trying to forecast the future. They are already feeling it and seeing it in the numbers, just the sheer number. When you look at the impact of the rental car industry on the automotive industry, it is astonishing. So what I have to say is I see our corporate partners moving forward with heart, but also being very, very smart and continuing to monitor, continuing to keep their workers safe. I mean, we also have to keep that in mind. That is at top of mind for all of them, keeping their workers safe so that people can come to work and drive the assembly that's needed, but do so with confidence that their employer has taken all of the right steps. So we are certainly not out of the woods yet. I do believe we'll emerge better. If you look at 2008 and the impact of that recessionary period on this particular industry, I believe we got smarter and we got better. I believe I see that already happening today, so that people are looking at their workforce and starting to challenge them to think post-COVID, post-pandemic, and what that looks like as we start to get people back to work around the country. But I would say the best way to describe it, I would say, is tentative, because there's still so many unknowns that, as we all saw in March, at the drop of a hat, it could change the way that we're operating.
If I can tell you at least what I am trying to practice, you have to see the reality. Like we operate in 16 different industries, mm-hmm. and automotive and IoT, it's hurt, but not to the extent of the travel and hospitality.
Sure.
So someone smart told me, you have to, as a leader, readjust your norm and say, from this norm, we have to improve every week, every 30 days. Unfortunately, the norm for the hotel, rent-a-car, airline industry, I would say they are operating at 20-30%. So you cannot imagine you're going to jump to 100% immediately, right. But you have to lead the troops to grow the potential. And if I can ask you, Michelle, what is your thoughts about how should the leader of a big automotive industry or a leader of your own team, your own organization, what is the responsibility of a leader during this challenging times?
Mm-hmm. I think true leaders, you're going to show your true colors during a challenging time. First and foremost is the safety of your employees and your customers, making sure those people know that you care about them and you're taking every precaution to ensure that they can do what they need to do in a space of safety. Secondly, I think it's our responsibility as leaders to constantly be looking at what the future looks like. We certainly have to operate in our current realities, as you just stated, but we also have to begin now really looking at what the future looks like and preparing our team for that. One of the examples I'll give you is, if you look in Michigan, in addition to the automotive manufacturing, other manufacturing takes place here that I don't know that people always realize. When you look at furniture manufacturers, all of the major office furniture manufacturers, Herman Miller, Steelcase, Hayworth, they're based right here in Michigan. And when you look at their business model, we've migrated from a concept that had closed door office spaces to open concept office spaces. And then you're hit with a pandemic where no one wants to be in an open space. So they have had to retool and really start to look at what happens if many companies, and we've seen major corporations, Dell, for example, came out and said that 50% of their employees will never return to an office. They will be allowed to work from home. Square, Twitter, Jack Dorsey has said, you know, his employees will always work from home. So if you're in that business, as a leader, it's my responsibility to start to help my team shape the framework, as you stated earlier, and really start to say, how do we cater to home-based offices? How do we cater to somehow modifying all of these open office spaces that we've created so that we can meet the needs of that customer? I think people are being very smart about that, but the leaders that I see are not getting bogged down in where we are today. We're certainly managing through low cash flow and the many challenges we have with safety. But more importantly, we're looking at the future and looking at the opportunities in the future and preparing our teams to seize those.
I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, as I mentioned, some industries are hurt much at a greater scale. But I spoke to some semiconductor organization. There are more people buying more modem for their homes and equipment to set up their home office. But it's always, Michelle, great to talk to you. And again, I don't know if Simon or some of the audience have some questions, but we very much look forward to hopefully physically, but if not virtually, launching the Plug and Play before September this year in Detroit.
We are looking forward to it. We have our annual procurement conference September 1st through the 3rd with the virtual platform, and we will certainly be including you there. But I think this is just the start of our virtual relationship and continuing to move this forward. We're excited to work with you and your team, and can't wait to launch and see you in person sometime, hopefully soon.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
And to both of you, this has been such a terrific dialogue with great insight. We like to put a little blog together after these talks. And Michelle, when we have guests who speak in bullet points, it makes it really easy. It's just fantastic.
I've been well trained.
It's the JD in you. But look, we've got some really good questions here, and you know, a lot of companies are trying to think, how do we not just make tokenistic efforts, but how do we meaningfully, you know, address issues of diversity and inclusion? And I wonder whether you have maybe some advice for a company that is looking to do something meaningful in earnest, and maybe whether there are companies that you look to as real examples in this space that really impress you with the actions that they've taken.
Sure. Look, I think at the end of the day, we start with our employee base. And if you don't have a diverse employee base, I think that's one of the first things you address. Why is our environment not inviting enough to attract, recruit, and retain women and minorities? Because if you look around and everyone in the room looks alike, came from the same background, you're likely missing many opportunities to grow your business. When you look at the McKinsey studies that have come out and literally shown that you can increase your EBITDA like 34% by simply infusing diversity, because people of different experiences and lines of thought add to it. So there's a true business reason for doing this. So I say start with the employee base. Many times you'll find that your employees have excellent ideas on how to actually achieve this. Many corporations came out with these eloquent letters, Simon, and those are wonderful, but it's only the beginning. So to Saeed's point, look, I'm investing now in organizations that I might not have invested in the past, but I now see the need and I want to be a part of the solution. But I realize that's just the first step. And I think that's how we're going to see true sustainable change, is understanding that our role is to advocate and to ensure that there are real goals and metrics about that advocacy. I don't want to just write a check for $10,000 to an organization. I want to understand that by doing so, I'm coming back and I'm looking at at metrics. Did we help move the needle? And if we didn't, how do we tweak it just like we would anything else in our business to drive the real change that we'd like to see?
That's really good. I know that we've put together a task force, but I mean, I think that feels like a meaty and tangible project
Right.
To do that. So that's great. One of the I've got a question here around the recovery, and I suppose the context is you see a lot of large enterprises. I think there's a lot of forecasts for M&A activity going to be coming up, and how do you see supply chains or the automotive sector recovering, and what collaborations would you envision so that during the recovery it doesn't harm or further perpetuate the systemic inequalities that we see before the pandemic?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I will tell you, McKinsey's study that I mentioned literally is predicting that 40% of minority firms could be dissolved in 2020 as a result of the pandemic and the resulting unrest. So we and others have been very adamant. Number one, I know some of that consolidation is just a natural part of a recessionary or economic downturn, right? But I can try to make sure that I work with every corporation. So what I've gone to our chief procurement officers and ask is, if we know that there are businesses that are going to be dissolved, we have now assembled a group of minority owners that would like to have the ability to purchase those. So being very smart about that. And that's where I think investors like Saeed can make a tremendous impact, because there will be opportunity that comes from this to now get involved and take some of these businesses that are quite viable if they have the right operational structure and talent in place to still be able to meet the need of a customer. So understanding that there will be some consolidation. I'd love to, I used my Cinderella analogy earlier because Disney is opening back up as we speak. But the reality is that would be a fairy tale to tell everyone that everyone is going to survive, because it is going to be the survival of the fittest. But what we can do, and our role, is to ensure that strong businesses are still in place, and that in fact we start to replace businesses that are going out during the pandemic, or as a result of it, I should say, with minority and women-owned firms that are strong, eager, talented, and ready to take the helm.
I suppose that speaks to having an actual strategy around this. Just as you say, a task force to look at your employee base, but actually a task force to look at your procurement. You have options here. Don't just look for what looks like you. Those kinds of things.
It's so true. You asked me if there were some corporations. I think about the automotive industry in particular. Supplier diversity was, the trail was blazed by automotive companies. And it was 25 years ago, those leaders that were simply deliberate and intentional. They said, we have a goal and we are going to achieve it. And they were C-suite leaders. I could start naming the names: Harold Kuttner's and the Carlos Mazarins, Burt Jordan's and Tony Brown's, those people that said, we will use our position of influence to ensure that we don't have 1% minority spend in procurement, but we know we can do more than that. And we know we can create organizations. So if there are two words for your bullets, I would say be deliberate, be intentional, set a goal, and you can achieve it.
I think that's a wonderful final word, but I always like to leave the final word to Saeed. So I'll hand it over to you, Saeed.
No, again, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. And, we really see the light at the end of this tunnel. And I hope for sure this coronavirus has brought people together, and there is more empathy, there is more closeness, because it affects everybody the same. And I hope that we learn some humility and positive attitude from this as we come out the other side. But it's great having you with us.
Thank you so much, Saeed. We so look forward to it. I say we should have a part 2. Let's come back and talk about, from your perspective, what you're really seeing out there in the VC world, and how you're pivoting as well, because I know your wheels are turning as to how to continue to grow even stronger businesses. So thank you for having me.
Michelle. Thanks.